première activité, notre premier défi, c'est de sensibiliser le maximum de personnes. D'abord, depuis l'école, depuis l'université, impliquer ces jeunes à s'intéresser au DNS, impliquer ces jeunes à s'intéresser aux adresses IP, aux adresses IPv6, IPv4. Comment est-ce qu'on peut contribuer à bâtir cet Internet de demain? Et bien évidemment, nous sommes chaque jour confrontés à des défis. Et le premier défi auquel nous sommes confrontés, c'est le coût de l'Internet. Parce qu'avec le Covid, il a été vraiment difficile de pouvoir faire des séminaires en présentiel comme on avait eu l'habitude de faire. On a beaucoup plus opté pour les webinaires, pour les séminaires en ligne, les webinaires, mais beaucoup ne pouvaient pas accéder à ce nouveau moyen de communication à cause du coût de l'Internet. Et aujourd'hui, avec les différentes structures qui sont nos partenaires, nous sommes en train de travailler sur le moyen de réduire le coût de l'Internet ou de le rendre plus accessible aux jeunes pour faciliter, je peux dire, l'alphabétisation numérique. Et les travaux sont assez prometteurs car nous sommes aujourd'hui en travaux avec la TCI et sur comment est-ce que le régulateur national peut nous accompagner dans notre plan d'action. Et il y a aussi Fanny Saliou, qui est notre président au niveau du FGI Côte d'Ivoire et qui contribue énormément à ce qu'il y ait cette digitalisation au niveau de la jeunesse ivoirienne. Et il faut aussi noter que le ministère et certaines structures privées ou étatiques de la Côte d'Ivoire essaient de nous accompagner dans ce combat, mais c'est encore quelque chose d'assez nouveau. C'est vraiment nouveau en Côte d'Ivoire et nous avançons à pas de, je veux dire à pas de tortue, nous avançons progressivement, mais nous sommes sûrs que la nouvelle promotion que nous sommes en train de générer saura créer ce boom, saura inciter ces jeunes à vraiment contribuer pour bâtir l'écosystème numérique en Côte d'Ivoire, en Afrique de l'Ouest et pourquoi pas en Afrique. Je pense que c'est ce que j'avais à dire pour la Côte d'Ivoire et je suis ouverte aux questions. S'il y a des personnes qui souhaiteraient me poser des questions, je pourrais mieux m'étendre là-dessus pour ne pas monopoliser la parole. Je passe le micro à Lily. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup, Eva. Thank you for the work you're doing in Côte d'Ivoire, for the sensitization and for creating awareness for the participation of the youth in internet governance and policy discussions and more. So thank you so much. And we go now to Rashad. Rashad, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Lily.
Hello.
I hope you can receive me.
Hello.
Yes, can you receive me?
Alors, vous m'entendez?
Yes. Yes, je vous reçois très bien. Please, can I go in French?
Right, please do.
Okay, thank you so much. Ok, bonjour à tous et merci pour cette opportunité de participer à cette journée des jeunes du WACREN. C'est vraiment un plaisir pour moi d'être ici pour parler de la participation des jeunes dans la transformation numérique au Bénin. Donc, je suis Ben Rachat Sanusi du Bénin. Je suis actuellement responsable de la communication et des relations publiques au niveau du chapitre Bénin de l'Internet Society. Donc, parlant de la participation des jeunes dans la question du numérique au Bénin, plusieurs initiatives se sont mises en place. Et comme je suis membre du chapitre Bénin de l'Internet Society, nous avons pu mener beaucoup d'actions dans ce sens. Donc, nous nous intéressons beaucoup plus à l'inclusion numérique, c'est-à-dire comment impliquer beaucoup plus de personnes dans les questions liées à la gouvernance de l'Internet, aussi dans les questions liées à la cybersécurité, l'accès Internet, et aussi les jeunes sont intéressés par le développement d'applications pour liées plus au contexte local. Donc, nos activités vont plus dans le sens des séances de renforcement de capacité. Un exemple le membre force que nous organisons chaque mois au sein du chapitre Bénin de l'Internet Society pour plus impliquer les membres aux questions liées à l'Internet. Donc, chaque mois, nous organisons souvent des membres force, c'est des séances de renforcement de capacité en fait. Et le thème est des speakers pour un peu et les séances de sensibilisation. Nous allons vers nos universités, les collèges et même les écoles pour parler d'Internet parce que l'accès à Internet, ce n'est pas une question d'âge, ça passe par tout le monde. Donc, nous allons vers ces lieux d'éducation et nous faisons des campagnes, c'est-à-dire la semaine en ligne. Donc, nous faisons cette campagne depuis une semaine et campagne qui vise à informer les dames sur comment se comporter en face du cyberharcèlement. Aussi, une autre manière dont nous nous impliquons dans la logique que nous avons pu amener, c'est le livre sur l'histoire de l'Internet au Bénin. Donc, l'année dernière, j'ai, avec Raina, coordonné un projet sur l'histoire de l'Internet au Bénin. Et ce projet a été porté par le chapitre Bénin de l'Internet Society. Donc, ça nous a permis d'impliquer beaucoup de jeunes dans ce projet. Et comme ça a encouragé le volontariat, le travail en équipe. Du coup, après 8 mois de travail collaboratif, nous sommes arrivés à un livre qui parle de toute l'histoire de l'Internet depuis 1992 à 2020. Donc, le livre permet de revisiter les premiers pas de l'arrivée de l'Internet au Bénin, mais aussi, il permet d'apprendre sur les challenges relevés et de construire des évolutions technologiques et le développement de nouveaux services basés sur l'Internet. Du coup, les bases sont jetées pour continuer à écrire l'histoire de l'Internet au Bénin. Donc, je ne vais pas monopoliser la parole, je vais m'en arrêter là. Merci beaucoup, Lily. Thank you,
Merci
Lily. The floor
beaucoup.
is yours.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Rashad. Thank you for the capacity building programs from Benin, for even opening it to people outside the country. We see your work and really appreciate you. Thank you for sharing what Benin has been up to with all of us. So I'm excited to move away from West Africa to Uganda. This is Eastern Africa, if I'm right. So here we take Innocent. Innocent, the floor is yours. Share with us what it is like for youth participation in digital transformation in Uganda. Innocent, if you can hear me, please go ahead. I just asked you to unmute, so kindly take the floor and share with us.
Hello, Lily. Can you hear me?
Right, I can.
All right, thank you. My name is Adriko. I work with youth on internet governance, digitalization. Currently, I volunteer with the Digital Literacy Initiative as the engagement lead. So it's an honor to be here. The topic seems very interesting. Digital transformation in Uganda. How have the youth participated? Well, Uganda has one of the youngest populations in the world, with more than 70% of its population being young people. And we also acknowledge that it's this group, the youth group, that is most connected actually in Uganda. We do realize that it's the youth that are actually embracing digital technologies more compared to the other categories of people. The young people have been especially due to the opportunities. Well, there are opportunities, and of course, there are also challenges that I'll talk about later. Youth have embraced digitalization, especially in most of the sectors, which has been a great boost to our economy, first of all, and has helped to improve their livelihoods. Of course, how they live in their communities have been using digital solutions, especially during this pandemic. The youth have been able to provide digital solutions to health responses and, of course, the economic recovery from the pandemic. Of course, with this pandemic also, the youth were forced. I don't want to say they were forced, but I think it was more of like an opportunity. It was an opportunity for them to create options, because options are needed. For example, due to the restrictions and gatherings and whatever, there was need for options the options to physical activities, of course. So the young people all over the country developed a number of platforms. Talk of e-learning platforms. I've seen so many e-learning platforms and options for people to study. I've seen so many options. I've seen some working solutions for people. I've seen a number of digital hubs rise up, of course. And the young people have been able to solve real community problems through digital solutions. However, putting all this aside, access to these digital technologies has remained limited to some of the young people, and this I would say especially in the rural areas where technologies, but some are still having this challenge. And one of the challenges, actually, most of these challenges have been spoken by my colleagues from Nigeria, my colleagues from Benin, but some of these challenges here in Uganda, one is connectivity, in the remote areas of the country. In the statistics showed that actually, so this actually brought us on the question of affordability. So there's a challenge of affordability to the youth, the young people in Uganda, and then also my colleagues talked about digital literacy and skilling. This is a big challenge too here in Uganda. So initiatives like the one I volunteer for are trying to cover this gap. We are trying to cover the digital skilling gap, the digital literacy gap, through advocacy, through engagement in various institutions of learning, of course, in various communities. And at least I can say a number of stakeholders have been able to put in a hand or to engage in these efforts in order to see that some of these gaps are covered. So that's all I can say from Ugandan side. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you so much, Innocent. So we see that we have very different countries, situations that may differ, but actually many are related to each other. We see the issue of digital literacy. We see the issue of meaningful participation. We go on to see those of even access. So thank you so much to all our youth reps for presenting what the issue is like and what participation is like from their countries. I truly appreciate it. So we are going to take,
Really?
right, we're going to take the presentation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Efa. Please.
Sorry, we are privileged. We have the CEO of WACREN joining the session right now. So if Leila can hold on for a few seconds, and then we will have our CEO speaking. So Leila, can you please stop sharing so we can thank you, Leila. All right, so let's welcome the CEO of WACREN, Dr. Boubacar Barry. It's a privilege to have him join us. We are on with a conference and he's been so busy, but he decided to, because he loves the youth, he decided to just come in here and say a word to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Efa. I don't just like the youth, but I'm a young person too. Okay, so I'm really very happy to see this event happening. We wanted to organize it face-to-face last year in Cotonou. Then we postponed it this year to Cotonou again. But unfortunately, the pandemic COVID-19 did not allow us to meet in person. The only message I want to convey here is that I'm very proud that we have very engaged young people from our community. And I do thank everyone for having made the time, presenting, attending, discussing, because the future of Africa is our youth. So I can only encourage you to continue like that. I'm very sorry I couldn't attend the meeting from the beginning because I was in another meeting, but I will stay with you up to the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you too, sir, for joining. Thank you very much. Over to you, Lily.
Thank you, sir, for joining. This means a lot to us, and we appreciate your presence. So I want to go on and take the presentation from Madame Leila Deka. She's the IR project manager at GANT, and she supports the development of high-capacity internet networks for research and education across Africa. We are happy to hear from you. And like everyone, if you're part of an NREN or work with them, that's a good one. If you're yet to meet or know more about NREN, this is an opportunity for you. So Madame Deka, the floor is yours, and please share with us.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Can you all see my presentation?
Right,
Yeah,
I
can see.
Perfect. So thank you very much. Today, what I will do is I will introduce research and education networks and the value proposition for youth in Africa. Some of you might be familiar to research and education networks, others might not. Let me start with what are NRENs? So quick introduction. When did NRENs appear in Africa? It all started in the end of the 90s, where there was a growing wave of action among African universities and research institutions focusing on the need for global connectivity in order to provide access to journal databases, as well as other online learning and learning resources. Back then, the only option for regional and global connectivity in most of Africa was via satellite, and prices were extremely prohibitive. Therefore, like in other parts of the world, some bandwidth consortiums initiated, and they decided to buy together connectivity for their end users. And this is at the same time, national research and education networks in Africa and regional research and education networks in Africa emerged. But how do we define it? What's very specific about an NREN is that it's usually a non-for-profit organization that is dedicated to two main things: connectivity for research and education, but also other added value services. Currently in Africa, we have more than 38 NRENs that are distributed in 3 different regions. In ASREN is for North Africa and the Middle East as well. WACREN, where you belong, is for Western and Central Africa. And in the Eastern and Southern Africa, we have the UbuntuNet Alliance, that is a regional research and education network. How does it work? So I am not a network engineer, but this is how we try to explain how it works. So if you think of a national institution in your region, for example, the Kwamame, the University of Applied Science will connect to Garnet. So that's a national research and education network in Ghana. Ghana is connected to the WACREN backbone, and the WACREN backbone is connected to the global community. And so therefore, if a student in Ghana wants to work with any European student or any international student, or they want to exchange certain data or have a common joint project on a certain service, it all go through the 3 regional backbones and the international backbones.
Hello, Leila. I'm
Yes.
very sorry to cut in.
Yes.
Please, can you speak a bit slowly?
Oh, yes.
Because
Okay.
there's interpretation going on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yes, so this is how it works. So for over 10 years, REN has been collaborating with regional research and education networks throughout the globe and interconnects over 100 countries, creating a continental gateway for collaborative research and education across and beyond Africa. In Africa, it's a pan-African network in the making. I referred to you earlier that there were 38 NRENs in Africa. Nevertheless, so far we have connected 20 countries in the 3 different regions. But good news, specifically for the WACREN region, is that in the coming weeks or coming days, as Boubacar recalled it in the opening plenary of the WACREN conference, Benin, Burkina Faso, and Côte d'Ivoire will be connected to the WACREN backbone. So we're quite looking forward for those 3 new countries to be connected very soon. And it's a Pan-African network in the making. And in order to continue to expand all these efforts, the European Union has been supporting RENs in Africa for already over a decade. And currently, the European Union is supporting the Africa Connect 3 project that aims at expanding the reach of the connectivity and services to new campuses or to new countries in Africa. The project overall aims at unlocking the potential of education and research through increased access of African education and research institutions to digital infrastructure and technologies. So that's the overall objective. And that translates into 4 main components or 4 main outputs, 4 main activity types that are implemented by WACREN, the UbuntuNet, and ASREN, and Géant supports in connectivity and in overall coordination. So then the question is, what is it so specific about NRENs? What's the NREN value proposition, and what are the challenges specifically in Africa and towards the youth? So there's a big problem that we are facing at the moment. There's digital divide, and we realize that only 2% of world's research output is contributed. It comes from Africans. Likewise, there's way less researchers in Africa than in any other continents. In addition to that, connectivity is expensive in Africa more than anywhere else. And students, although students and researchers have great potential, we unfortunately are noticing that the digital divide is a gap and prohibits them from actually actively contributing to world's research and just being schooled, let's say, normally in the 21st century. So a lot of things stand in the way of NRENs and RENs. There are monopolies, prices sometimes are inflated, limited domestic support, as well as limited funding overall. So it's not an easy environment to navigate. Nevertheless, NRENs have a true value proposition. First, they are non-for-profit that are really looking in the best interest of their end users. The NREN's interest is to make sure that every student, every researcher has enough affordable, adequate connectivity to be able to carry on either his studies or his research. So that's very important. It's end user oriented, so it's youth oriented. That's the approach that NRENs have. In addition to that, they provide high quality connectivity that sometimes you cannot obtain with ISPs for a similar price, so you will have to pay, it will be far more expensive, and dedicated services. So I was referring to services. You can think of some trust and identity services, which is a good way to authenticate yourself. And we know you may be familiar to EduGain or to something that is more internationally known, Adriko. There's some collaboration services such as EduMeet or Zoom. WACREN has provided Zoom licenses to their region to make sure that online education can be continued. Security services, user supports, but also NRENs together work, and RENs make sure that they create a sense of community. So it's NRENs and RENs often try to help each other across continent and across countries to make sure that that the end users and the researchers are being helped the best we can. I was talking earlier on against the fact that there were quite prohibitive prices of connectivity in Africa. Per the ITU price 10 reports and the recommendation, the current global recommendation, an individual should not be spending more than 2% of their GNI in order to be connected. And you clearly see on this graph that in countries like Rwanda, Niger, Madagascar, or Burundi, 100% of someone's GNI would be needed in order for them to receive appropriate bandwidth and connectivity, which is very, very far away from the 2% recommending. So what do NRENs do? Well, they act together as a buying club. So by the institution, by being together, can actually leverage better prices for as a group. So instead of having one university in a country asking for affordable prices nationally, they will come together and say, we want a better deal because we'll take more. And so it's been quite successful in multiple countries in Africa. And I do think that a similar results are taking place at the moment in West and Central Africa. What's the impact on the youth? Concrete examples of impacts now. Well, right now we already have, with African NRENs, are connecting over 1,900 institutions. That represents approximately more than 3 million students. NRENs ensure connectivity in some remote areas. They also ensure that researchers can actually do their research at the campus level in Africa, rather than feeling the need to travel to another African country or abroad because they do not have adequate resources. There's a lot of great examples of great application examples in different countries. NRENs also provide continuous teaching and training. So there's the Women in WACREN initiative as well that needs to be highlighted, that where we are giving the proper tools to women in STEM to make sure that they can I think it's Python and it's coding training, and I think they're expanding it to more in the coming years. And the demonstrated impact of NRENs can be found as well on the Africa Connect 3 website or on the In the Field blog. So there are multiple trainings opportunities, NRENs are doing a really good job at making sure that open science is accessible in Africa. So I would actually invite you to go and check out our websites. I'll put it in the link to check out the websites to read about the stories and all the great things we've done. Specifically in times of COVID, like NRENs have really made sure that that connectivity and services remained available while students were no longer on campuses and on premises. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Right. Thank you so much, Leila, for sharing with us. So I think you're going to stay with us on our panel. So it would be awesome if people can type in the chat if they have any questions. Would allow time for you to also unmute if there's a chance. But kindly put it in the chat or use the Q&A, and I'm able to pick it up and ask Leila. So far, we have a question from before. I think this was really comprehensive, but as we go along, we'll be able to gather many others. So I'm going to just have you, Leila, join us again for the next session, which is our panel discussion. So we've introduced what NRENs are. One moment, let me mute. Okay, fine, this works well. So we've introduced what NRENs are, what the work is like for people in this network, what the benefits are also. And we all know that over the world, digital transformation is a fast growing phenomenon, and Africa, West Africa, we are not left out of it. And at the center of this is young people who are growing up not only as users of the internet and technology, but are really contributing to building its core. And it is why it's important that we have many of us roped into the scene to also contribute our ideas to shaping it. So I just want to go into the conversation, building up from where we left off, and I'll invite the other panel members. I'll just read short bios about you. So we have also joining Leila, we have Bez Owutu, who's a certified information security and compliance leader with a proven record of 14+ years of hands-on experience in financial services, insurance, retail, healthcare, hospitality, and many industries. He's going to join us and will give us the bit from the cybersecurity sector and how young people can also use this to our advantage. Then we have Felix Nati. So Felix works with the Open Foundation West Africa, who actually work closely with any organization into open resources and making resources available. And I think WACREN and NRENs would be of much interest to the work that OFWA or Open Foundation West Africa does. And he also works on many projects with Wikimedia, which we know is the largest encyclopedia open for all of us. So I'm glad to have all panel members also join in. For Leila, thank you. For Bez, thank you. For Felix, thank you. So I'm going to ask the question that launches us into the discussion some more to discuss the challenges and opportunities for young people participating in digital transformation across Africa. So I want to ask this first to Bez. Bez, if you're able to hear me, are various countries fashioning their digital future with the youth in mind? Do we have youth at the center of these things that are being established in countries?
Thanks, Lee. I think, and I'm happy to be here. I make trips to Ghana. I'm actually originally Ghanaian, so I make trips to Ghana a lot. And I've seen that transformation happen from 10 years ago to now. I've seen that gap really bridged a lot. And I think there's no digital transformation without the youth. I'll give you an example. My mother would never use Uber, right? It's not her style. So the youth is the core of digital transformation. And without the youth, I believe digital transformation is not going to move at the speed it's moving. And in the middle of that is also cybersecurity, right? There is no good, we're doing mobile money transfers all the time, right? And we need to ask certain questions as to what kind of firewalls are these, banks have? What kind of firewalls do they have? Where does your card, you use a POS system, where does your data even sit? These are questions that we need to really ask. And I think the youth being in the center of all this, it's really the way forward to get digital transformation to the maturity level we want to. It's a journey. You don't get there overnight, and even advanced countries, I think, still struggle with it. But you cannot ignore the importance of cybersecurity. I think I had mentioned to someone last night that about $7.2 billion is actually the amount of money stolen out of Middle East and Africa combined from scammers and cyber fraud, right? So digital transformation is good. It's exciting. We're doing a lot of things with the internet. We're moving at a very fast pace. But one thing we can also not ignore is that all it takes is a click of a link and all your data is gone, right? And that is really, so when I saw, when you guys invited me, I was very excited because that awareness needs to be created, because you could easily forget about that other aspect with the excitement of you moving along with a good digital transformation journey. You might really forget about the other aspects that could take you. So I'm really looking forward to this panel discussion. I think it's really an interesting topic you guys decided to choose. And as I had mentioned, there is no digital transformation without the youth. The youth is the driver. The youth is in the right position right now. And the time can never be right. The time is now. And COVID and the pandemic has even made it even better, right? Everyone has moved. A 360-degree, turnaround has happened within a short period of time with adopting technology and digital stuff. And I think it's all driven by the youth. And I'm sure there's a couple of people on this meeting that has to help their parents with a lot of configurations on their personal phones. Even it could be an iPhone, it could be, a whole lot of other things that the youth is really the leaders in this space. And, some boomers, I'll call it millennials, but some boomers are catching along. You can meet a few boomers who are really very good with the transformation, but majority of them, it's not their era. So they just rather go what they know. And I think the youth is really doing a phenomenal job in Africa right now. So thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Bess. So we've seen that times are not the same. Things have changed. We see efforts being put in to engage more people. You've also mentioned that young people are actually at the core of this, and also hinged to this to make it successful is the issue of security for the platforms you use for the agenda we are pushing. Thank you so much. I will come back to you. So we'll go to Felix. Felix has worked with a lot of people across the world, young people, and now he leads the Open Foundation West Africa. So I want to hear from you, Felix. Do you think there's meaningful participation for young people in the digital future?
So I'd like to go back a little bit to the question that you asked before. And I think, in my opinion, the youth is an active agent when it comes to digital transformation. But I also think that our leaders are not designing for inclusion. They're not designing the spaces in such a way that our leaders, our youth leaders can take active roles in. And so at the moment you find governments bringing up initiatives in digital transformation, and guess what? The policies are being made by older folks who have no idea about what is happening in our era. And so for me, I think the main determinant is that, are we finding youth in the spaces where these decisions are being made? If we are not, then they are not being included in the spaces. And then decisions that are being made are not deliberately being designed to cover our opinions or our plight or our interests. And so that's just my opinion on that. I see, now coming back to your question, I think that for the foreseeable future, there is a lot of work that the youth in Africa has to do to sort of like engulf themselves in this space and to lead and chart the new era for the youth or unborn generations that are yet to come. When I say this because African leaders, for some reason, just don't include us in anything. But then we also have the option and opportunities to put ourselves in spaces that allows us to chart the way and to lead the way when it comes to digital transformation. For example, information about Africa is very scanty on the web. If you want a railway station in the US, you'd find that on the web. But if you want a major place like, let's say, Shiashi or something in Ghana, you won't find it. And this is because Africans are genuinely not putting themselves in the spaces where they can curate those informations for people to use. And so for me, I feel that in as much as it is the work of our leaders to create that enabling environment for us to operate and to chart the spaces and to lead conversations in those fights, I also think it's very important for we, the youth, to identify those spaces and deliberately put ourselves there to be able to lead the new generation of transformational discussions and talks and initiatives on the continent.
All right. So where are you found? Are you invited? If you're not invited, which platforms do you use to let your advocacy and your work be seen and heard? So like you've mentioned, even there, maybe there's even the idea to include, but are we listened to? Does the conversation follow through with execution? How do we bring ourselves to that point as young people and other stakeholders? So I want to take it from Leila. Leila also works with the young people and she's interested in the research behind it and all. So Leila, do you see that countries are fashioning young people into work around the digital future and digital transformation?
So I'm going to give a more policy angle to this question. So complementing the two previous panelists, I do observe at an African Union level and at a European Union level a really strong political will to take youth into consideration when developing regional digital strategies. In Europe, for example, the EU has developed a digital education action plan 2021-2027 that has two strategic priorities: to foster a high-performing digital education ecosystem and to enhance digital skills and competences for the digital age. We see something very similar in the digital transformation study for Africa 2020-2030 that was drafted by the African Union. And the importance of youth and employment opportunities in the digital era is also really clear and essential. And it's interesting to see how they even put the word youth in her first sentence of their introduction. Youth is most of Africa to a certain extent, and it will grow. 60% of Africa's population now is under 25, and the 15-25 represent already 200 million people and should double by 2050. So this growing population is a challenge, but it's also a great opportunity for Africa to leapfrog. And yes, I took a policy angle. So from this regional or political let's say, interest, needs to as well come concrete national action plans at both the infrastructure and the digital skill level. And that's work. And I have no specific examples. Well, there are some initiatives in some countries where actually digitalization is they're trying to put youth and digitalization at the core of their news policies. But yeah, we need to make sure that we translate those high-level policies into concrete actions and measures to ensure to ensure that the employability of youth in Africa. Thank you very much.
Well put. So
Lily, Felix made a very good point. You know, a very, very good point, and Leila as well. if I have to piggyback on what Felix had said, digital transformation is sexy. Let me be very frank. The idea of it is nice. It's so good. It kind of correlates with development of a country, right? So everyone tries to get on board when they can. And Felix had mentioned that, you know, we don't put ourselves as an African continent on the internet. From a cybersecurity expert perspective, you can see it to be good, and you can see it to be a saving grace for the continent, right? I don't know whether it's deliberate or it's lack of knowledge, but if you put in a lot out on the internet, you better be ready that you have the cyber infrastructure to back it. So I'm actually, I mean, and Felix is more on the ground than I am. Felix, do you think it's the lack of, you know, is it a strategy based that we don't have this infrastructure for cybersecurity built out, so let's hold off until we build it? Or you think it's just sheer ignorance of we don't want to put ourselves out there? It's a very good point you made. I'm just trying to understand, what do you think is really the cause of it? Because everything is driven by internet now. So it would be very, I'll say, ignorant of any country to just pull away from the internet. So I'm actually trying to understand if it's from a strategy standpoint or it's pure ignorance.
So I don't have any scientific answer to this because I've not done any research on this. But the honest, from my experience working on the ground in Africa and understanding the context of the way things are working, it looks like Africans have generally not seen the internet as a space where they can curate information about what we're doing, and also a space where education can happen. And so you go online and you go to SlideShare, you find slides about all sorts of things in the world, but when you want to look at things specifically on Africa, you won't find them. And so education is being limited because generally we are not becoming content producers. We are not creating the content for people to harness and use. And it's not, I won't say that it's because of a cybersecurity issue. It's just the fact that people may not know that there are these opportunities to put those information out there. I'll give you a typical example. The 2060 agenda of the African Union is to build an ecosystem where Africans are trained and are abreast with whatever technologies are happening at the moment, and to use that on the continent. So in view of that, they are building something called the African Engagement, Youth Engagement Toolbox, and the toolbox is supposed to provide these online modules that will train Africans about entrepreneurship, and techpreneurship, and all these sort of things. And so even the African Union has realized that there are no current mediums, platforms, and channels to sort of like provide this educational opportunities for Africans to learn, and also the awareness about how to do it. For example, if you go on a platform like Wikipedia is an open source platform that curates information about everybody in the world, right? But out of the 6 million articles that exist, just about 2.6% is on Africa. And this is a big issue. And it's not because somebody is refraining us from putting information out there. It's just because Africans don't know they can contribute to Wikipedia. Right. And so there's a big issue about we not, first of all, being given the opportunity to put ourselves out there. And then also we, the youth, not finding those channels and mediums to put ourselves out there.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. So you may even explore some more and find out maybe language would be a barrier. So you have Wikipedia for languages, you could have for content, you could have for even referencing. So we want to look at what do you reference, since Wikipedia would want it to reference, what do you want to add to it? All this box up into the situation, and I'm glad that you all are bringing it up to show that there are avenues for us to put out our information there, especially in the age where we are also not just information, users, but we also create the information. So let's go to another part of the conversation, which is very interesting. And we want to look at the pandemic and the challenges and opportunities it came with it for digital transformation, and especially for youth. So in the wake of the pandemic, did it reveal any challenge or any opportunity for young people playing in the digital space? So I'll take Bez first, and I'll go to Felix and then Leila. So Bez, were there any opportunities or challenges that were spotlighted in the wake of the pandemic?
So I would say that the youth was already caught up with most of these technologies before the pandemic. We might not really weren't using it as much as we should have, and the pandemic made it much more, but I think the youth already had a hang of certain things. I think people were using Zoom way before the pandemic for other things. I think the adoption became on a bigger scale because we're all forced by the pandemic in a box and we needed to react to it, right? And you see that 50, 60-year-old companies are now using Zoom and they have a workforce working from home 100%. Again, they had to adjust their strategy because it's either that or you go out of business. And I think I will speak from the States, perspective, that you've realized that everyone is adopting to it, right? And when you look at it from Africa, we are doing it too, right? We're looking at Zoom right now, connecting 35 plus people in a single click of a button, right? So I think that the opportunity this pandemic presented to the youth, and specifically Africa, has always been, we thought outside the box. We've always had the ability to do that, but we needed something to push us to do it more. And I think this pandemic was that turning point for most of us. And that is me included. I had to think of ways to run my cybersecurity company in another way because I can't get in front of clients. So I had to think outside the box. How can I still be effective and efficient? And you realize that it saves a lot of money too. In the process of doing that, you don't have to do a lot of other things. So I think that the youth had already was using, we're already using, or we're already caught up with digital transformation. Things became, we were all forced to, you didn't have a choice. It's either that you do that or you don't do anything. So I believe that was the opportunity presented by the pandemic. The challenges was the demand. Everyone was looking for one thing. You get to a point, you cannot even log on to Zoom because everyone was using it, right? So you have to think of Microsoft Teams, you have to think of other avenues to make your things happen. So the challenge to me for the youth was finding other tools that can meet the demand of what they need to do because of the pandemic. Because now you have millions of people doing the same thing or looking for the same tools you're also looking for. And prior to the pandemic, it wasn't really, you need it, you can find it, right? And you get to the point where the pandemic just pushed that. So I think, to me, if I look at the pandemic in terms of digital transformation, I think it's been a blessing more than a curse. Not the other aspects of life, people lost their lives, other things happened that was bad, but I think it made the human race, specifically in Africa, to step up the game. That I don't need to go line up or queue up at the bank to make a deposit. I can now leverage my mobile banking app or whatever I need to do, mobile transfer, to really do the transfers I need to do without having to go. And that reduces the pressure being put on the banks as well. So I think it just helped the youth to think outside the box, and everybody who finds themselves in that ecosystem to think outside the box. And to me, we needed that. The world needed that efficiency. The world needed that. And I think the pandemic, unfortunately, the pandemic is what brought us that. I wish it was something else, but I think the pandemic has made most economies grow 10 years more within 1 year. You've achieved 10 years worth of development, 10 years of maturity, all within a 1 year span, because you had to do what you had to do to survive as a company, as a person, or anything else. And that would be my take on that.
Right, thank you so much. So you highlighted a point that we had to adapt to the times. We had to make use of the resources available. And what we thought was a future now became very clear and was like something we had to deal with and work with from day to day. What looked far-fetched was what we're using because we had to. And that is,
and with our culture, sometimes I can speak of Ghana, and I think it's similar to most African countries. Sometimes we have to be forced to adapt to something before we do it. I mean, opportunity might be there, but everyone kind of drags their feet until something happens. We are much more reactive than proactive as a continent. And I think that is where majority of the effort of our leaders needs to be spent on. We need to change the mindsets of being proactive and plan ahead rather than wait, let it happen until we react. And we've been lucky, we've been going along for a while as a continent, but a time will come that reactive might not solve the problems we need to solve, you know, and that's really what I think the leaders need to focus on going forward as a continent.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And I will take take Felix's view also. So what were the opportunities and challenges that were made very, were in limelight, or what was made very obvious by way of the pandemic? When it began, you could see that this was a challenge. You could see that this was an opportunity, especially for young people in the digital space.
Okay, so I really like what Bear said, especially Africans being very reactive and not proactive. I think it's very, very true. We need more avenues to show that we are not a reactive continent, but more of like a proactive one. If I look at my surroundings and look at the very little things that I experienced within the COVID pandemic, I think for me, the challenges were more apparent in these 4 areas. It was apparent in education, communication and socialization, production and industrialization, and it heightened the misinformation crisis that existed in the world. And so when I say education, what I'm talking about literally here is the fact that during the pandemic, people had to go home, and teachers had to resort to online course modules and a few other things. These were technologies that were not predominantly used in Ghanaian institutions. And so then when people had to stay back at home, it was a big issue. Universities were scrambling for how they were going to continue to train their students back in the house. And this was a very, very big issue here. Now, platforms like Zoom and Google Hangout and Microsoft Teams that was not initially intended for training online were overburdened with calls here and there. And so at a point in time, if you experience this, notice that when you were on Zoom calls, they were just becoming slow, right? And these were big issues. Now, when you go into the communication or socialization sector, I thought it was also very, 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 very keen for human beings, as we are, as social animals, right, to move out and freely do things. But then the pandemic put like an infringement on our right, and we couldn't do that. Now, with the introduction of technologies like Zoom and all these communication platforms, it became very innovative for the youth to use. And as much as it was a challenge, it was also an innovative avenue for youth to find ways to connect. And I really like this example of a gentleman who went up his roof to hang some clothes and then saw a girl across the street through his window, wanted to chat with the girl. They actually used a drone to exchange numbers, and then finally got in touch through a video call, and even had wine on the video call. And that was their way of interacting through the pandemic. And I thought that was brilliant. It showed we Africans that there were better avenues of doing things. Gone are the days where every business meeting had to be meeting someone physically, or having a party meant that meeting people physically. The pandemic brought its own new prospects to us and showed us ways that we would be innovative with the same technologies that we used to have before, in much more ways that are appreciative and less burdening to everybody. Now, when you go into production and industrialization, it was a big issue. Now, everybody was waiting for China to send in nose masks. And China was not sending because the COVID issue was pretty big over there. And so then what did we have to do? Africans began to use the African fabric to make nose masks, and that was innovation. So in as much as it brought us a challenge, it also brought us an opportunity to make nose masks in our own spite. There were youth in Africa that were printing the face shield with 3D printing softwares and hardware. So they were just printing this in their backyards and selling them in the country and on the continent. It made a lot of sense. So for me, these areas were the most hit production, communication, education, but also it was an opportunity for Africans to find avenues to do even more. Now, the last one I want to talk about that I thought was a big challenge was misinformation. So cases were being reported all over the world that countries are having COVID like 90%. Meanwhile, that was not the case. And that was a huge misinformation gap that we had. And it's not like this did not exist before. It existed, but it became more apparent during the COVID time, right? Now, we the youth did not take the advantage to counter some of these occurrences on the internet and to change them. And I'll give you a typical example of how we did that through our platforms, right? So for example, in Ghana, we have a team at the Open Foundation West Africa that watches information that is being curated on Wikipedia. And we were checking the COVID articles on Wikipedia, as well as COVID-related articles like hand washing, what it means to have, what human right means in this particular situation, how your rights could be curtailed just because of this emergency and all of that, just so people could get the right information and to navigate this pandemic with knowledge. Right. And this is something that we the youth could have contributed to like very earnestly. And I think very, very hugely on the internet. But like I said before, people generally did not know they could contribute to these spaces and to change the discussions that were going on and to even speak to the truth about what was happening in their countries about COVID. Right. In as much as this was a big issue, we played our role on the ground. Even with education, we started what we call the K-Weeks for Education, where we're distributing offline resources through a box, a Raspberry Pi, and these students could have all the resources even in their homes. And these Raspberry Pis could be connected either by phone or even through a TV, and the right resources were being shared with students, right? But I think what I want to do in this particular section of the questioning is to sort of like draw our minds to all of these challenges that we went through and to challenge us to think beyond the status quo and to begin to see the opportunities that exist around us. Because most often than not, we wait for tragedies to actually be innovative. And I think it's high time we change from that.
Right. So still hinging on the idea of being proactive rather than reactive and finding more preventive approaches than creative, if I should say. So I want to, we've had your views on the challenges and opportunities. And I want to go to Leila and ask you, because you are more into the RENs and the research, on how you think that education plays a role in fostering the participation of young people in digital transformation.
Oh, so next, okay. If we want youth to participate in the digital economy and transformation, they need to have the right skills and competences, but from an early age on. I will give you an example. I went to Estonia, and we visited the Estonian NREN with some participants from Ghana and from Benin last year, no, actually in 2019. And while we were there, we were all fascinated by a little educational toy that was teaching kids from age 6 onwards how to code. And of course, the Estonian NREN there also had the trainers sent to schools to ensure that coding became part of the DNA of all little Estonian. So it has to be there from an early age on. Later, as a child and during the youth, and for young people, there needs to be computing education. So we ensure that people are digitally literate and also have a good understanding of data-intensive technologies. And this requires trained educators. So yeah, you need education before you have you need education to youth in order to make sure that they're digital literate and they participate in the digital transformation. You also need national education programs that needs to be embedded in policies and ensure as well that everyone has access to affordable equipment and adequate infrastructure. Without equipment, without infrastructure, you can train the teachers, but if the students can't use anything at home or a library or a center where they can actually explore and use their skills, it's also a little useless. And also furthermore, I think it's very important as well that if we want youth to participate in a digital transformation, we need to enhance the number of digital specialists, and particularly among girls and women. So we need to make sure we have those university career paths that are becoming more and more numerous throughout Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leila. So next up, I want to have recommendations from all our speakers for stakeholders, and especially because our CEO is here of WACREN, it will be good to have recommendations. But I see that there are a couple of questions in the Q&A session. So I'm going to address one to each speaker, and then we go on to take recommendations. So quickly, and I'll give this to Bez, or I'll throw this to Bez because he has a background also in financial services. So Amira is asking, how does digital transformation impact the financial services positively or negatively? She says in your country, so because you have worked across, you can give us an idea of how digital transformation impacts financial services. Bez? Okay, we don't have Bez here right now, so maybe I can let Felix, okay, I'll give Felix another one, then I'll come back to Leila while we wait for Bez. So Felix, I'm going to give the third one to you because of the work you do. So Michael is saying, I believe Africa at the moment is doing its best in providing education on digital education and digital transformation, and it's growing gradually in Africa, thanks to digital accessories like computers and smartphones. And his question is this, where should business start with digital transformation, and how can it be beneficial to the African youth in rural areas or some who are jobless? African child in the city. So I'm thinking the question sums it up and says that, how do businesses start with digital transformation? Where do you start off from? And how can it be beneficial to African youth in rural and urban areas?
So this is a very tough question. Where do business start with digital transformation? Every business is very different, and the approach is very different for everyone. If you are a business and you're thinking of employing the use of digital transformation, it should be apparent in the fiber of the organization. A classical example is Open Foundation. When we started, we wanted not to be an organization that was fiscally present in everything that we do. By that, I mean, we didn't want to have team members in a confinement just to be able to work. And so we started with, like, for example, working on Google Suite for business. And that meant that we could work, collaborate, and not have to be in one place, right? So I say it's very different for every business, because you have to understand how the business operates and to be able to suggest what kind of tools and resources would work in their context. For some businesses, it may not make sense at all to have maybe a Google Suite for business working for them. They would need to have fiscal convenience, but then use other resources or tools to have other digital transformation avenues in the business. So, for example, during this COVID time, you find a lot of businesses drawing back a little bit from relationship management and rather go in the way of Zoom calls and other things to manage relationships with clients. And this does not mean that these organizations are not still keeping their offices. For example, banks, they're still keeping their offices because they need the offices to actually, the office is actually a requirement for the work that they do. However, other aspects of the business can be digitally transformed to suit the current reforms and current changes that are happening. So there's no one size fits all approach for this. It will have to be based on what you share about the business and what kind of advice we can give to you.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So different approaches all towards improving your process with the digital, a digital tool or something of the sort. He asked the question to conclude this, and he says, what is the culture needed? And I think you could just give us the general idea what companies should be looking at if they want to be really tech or digital driven. What is the culture needed for digital transformation?
I think the can-do spirit, and to think that for everything you think about, there's probably a solution out there already. Not to try to think of reinventing the wheel and trying to break iron with bare hands, but then thinking in your mind that whatever is possibly a challenge in your line of business or the workflow of your business probably has a solution already. And I always say this, when people ask me questions for things, I say, Google it. If you don't find it, then you ask an expert in the field. Most likely you find them on YouTube, Google, or wherever.
Right.
And to piggyback off Felix as well, I think if anyone wants to adopt digital transformation, being in an economy or a company, you need to figure a way out to create security awareness and training and phishing exercises for your workforce, right? If you put your stuff on the internet, it comes with a risk. It's just now put it and walk away. And I think, Leila, from what you're saying, you're pretty much in the EU area with GDPR, and there's a lot of things going on the internet from a cybersecurity perspective that workforce needs to be educated. Is as important as the transformation strategy itself, right? Because you can do whatever you want. All it takes is a receptionist to click a phishing link and boom, you're done, right? So it's good to go the digital transformation route 100%. I mean, you wouldn't survive as a company if you're not going digital right now. You go out of business. It's as simple as that. But in doing that, you need to understand that it comes with its risks. It's not just a free lunch. It comes with its own risk when you decide to go the digital route. And the risk here is the fact that you could be liable to a cybersecurity breach. Depending on how big a company is, there could be reputation loss, as in, hey, if you're a bank and you're hacked, I'm taking all my money out, right? It could be reputation loss. There could be customers losing interest and confidence in you as a company. There's so many other things that organizations need to look into, and it starts with educating your workforce. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but, and just like Felix said, everything is on YouTube, everything is on Google. Security awareness. What is phishing? Phishing is really clicking an email, and when you click it, they tell you, hey, Amazon gift card, $25. You enter your credentials and boom, you've given up everything you need. And now there's a back door open that a hacker can come in. And if you're an admin to some sort of console, then you're even screwed, right? So the idea of digital transformation is so sexy, it's so exciting, and it's really the future. But it comes with its own cost, and companies need to be willing to assume that cost, or else you will go 10 years from now, because cybersecurity is, every company will get hacked at a point. It's a matter of when, and will you know whether you're hacked? And that is the most important thing that I would say, that transformation is good, go that route, it's only way to go now, but don't ignore the idea that other people's full-time job is trying to break your system and trying to hack you 24/7. And you need to make sure you're educating your workforce, or else you would lose everything you built from the digital transformation angle.
I think I wanted to throw in a question somebody asked early on, which I was posing to you about the impact of digital transformation on financial service. And I think you mentioned a bit on that. Maybe you can just share briefly what the impact of digital transformation is on financial service.
It's very, very, very big impact. And I will call it this way. There's something we call the PCI councils, the payment card industry, right? It's a coalition of Visa, American Express, MasterCard, and Discovery. And they have 12 requirements for financial institutions to follow if you're going the digital transmission route. Is that you need to protect cardholder data. That 16-digit card number on your debit card you use at POSs and at ATM centers. That information is all somewhere. All they need is your date of expiry, your CVV code, and your 16-digit number, and you're screwed. They can take everything they want out of it, right? So financial institutions, and I think most institutions in Ghana and in Africa, I think EcoBank and a few institutions are going that route of saying we are PCI certified. It means we know that we have good firewalls, we've segmented our so there's network segmentation, there's security awareness training, business disaster and recovery. All those things has to come in part of the business digital transformation, because if you're putting something online, you better have a disaster recovery plan. Anything can happen. Your servers can go down, your cloud company can get hacked, a data center can light up on fire. You need a business continuity and disaster recovery plan if you're working with data. And that is really, financial institutions are the people everyone looks at first. So you cannot ignore that anymore. We've ignored it for a very long time. And unfortunately, or fortunately for us as customers, banks are being pushed. And I know for a fact that the Bank of Nigeria, the Bank of Ghana is mandating PCI compliance for all the financial institutes, right? You need to have those processes in place to safeguard the card holder data you're collecting. And it's just not financial institutions. It cuts across everyone. Defense, education, interior. You have some sort of secret you need to protect. Someone will steal it from you if you don't protect it well. And that comes the idea of cybersecurity. So that's really the direction that I think it should, most banks and most institutions are going right now in terms of, of digital transformation. And it's the same idea. You can walk that walk, but you better look at the other aspects of it, or else you come to point zero.
Very well said. Thank you so much. Everything you do is hinged on security. If you don't want the information out there in the public domain, do also protect it and make sure all your systems are well protected. Remember, in every security network or system, the weakest link is the human. So as you put in firewalls and all, make sure you have the knowledge to be able to go through all of them. So I want to ask the last question to you, Leila, because somebody asked it, I think it's very profound. So the person is asking, I'd like to know if there are any strategies or anything concrete done to people with disabilities who are willing to join in digital transformation. So maybe you can share from the work you do with WACREN and the NRENs. Is there any provision for people living with disability?
I'm afraid I am not really familiar with that, with policies at either EU or national European or an African Union level. So I would like to, if, I mean, I saw this person was not, we couldn't tell who it was. So this person would like to share with us their email address. And I would be more than happy to look up that question and come back with something more concrete.
Right. Thank you so much. So would look forward to more information from there. Thank you, Beth, for sharing the chat. Thank you, Leila, also. And Felix, is Felix here? We want to take our last words before you leave for your next meeting, Beth and Felix, and then Leila. So in your last words, then we give the floor to Efa.
Okay, so I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you for the opportunity for the youth on topics like this. For me, it's always a very soft spot when it comes to topics like this because I'm really passionate about it. I just want to encourage everybody to take advantage of the spaces that are around them and to feel free to ask people and to learn and to grow within the digital transformation spaces. People are making jobs out of hobbies when it comes to digital transformation. And I'm a corporate of it. I have a finance background and I've done finance up to my master's level, but I end up in the tech world with no tech knowledge, right? And so your passion can drive you in spaces that you've never thought of. And I think the only opportunity that exists is for us to learn and build our capacity so that when the opportunity comes, we can actually take advantage of it.
Right, very well said. Where your passion meets a need, there you have a vocation. So we take Bez, your last word.
I pretty much share the same background as Felix. I also have a master's in finance and an MBA in technology strategy and an undergrad in economics, but I do cybersecurity. So it boils down to passion and your ability and your quest to learn. The information is out there. You just have to be open-minded and go for it. And you can know it all in IT. You cannot know it all, right? So if you want to go IoT, Internet of Things, go. If you want to go AI, go. If you want to go networking, go. There's so many aspects of it, but we all interconnect together and we speak a similar language. So what I would say is determine where your ability is, because the road becomes very rough sometimes that your passion is the only thing that can take you through it. And if you don't have the passion for it, the money comes later. but the passion is what really helps you to stay on course. And I think your background doesn't matter as much in IT because every information is out there. So the sky is the limit, and digital transformation is working out. And if anybody wants to know much more about cybersecurity, you know, Lily has my LinkedIn profile. You guys can always reach out. I'll guide you and help you the best way I can. But cybersecurity is the next, Africa is the next gold mine for cybersecurity because we have so much data in that continent that needs to be protected. And, you know, that comes with the digital transformation and everything. So if anyone has questions about where to start, how to get on it, let me know and I'll be able to help you guys out as much as I can.
Right. Thank you so much, Bez. I'll drop the link to your LinkedIn profile right now in the chat for everyone. And then to Leila, your final words.
Thank you very much, Lily. My final word will be that Africa, I would actually quote the former panelists, there is a real gold mine. Africa has really the potential to leapfrog with the digital economy. So youth can actually participate to its transformation, but it really needs two cumulative actions. So not only do we need to ensure that there is digital ecosystem in place and digital education ecosystem in place with adequate, affordable infrastructure and services. And when I say infrastructure, I mean internet, cable internet, other forms of internet as well. But also we need to make sure that we have enhanced digital skills and competences for the digital era. So with those two elements, Africa can leapfrog, and for this to happen, it will require a strong political support, but also it will also require maybe youth to advocate for their right to actually participate to the digital transformation and demand from their political leaders such a push and such a trajectory. That's it from me, Lily. Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you so much. There's so much potential here for African youth, for all of us. There's a University of YouTube, there's a University of Google, there's a University of communities like this. There's the depth of knowledge you can find in NRENs and WACREN, and this is the opportunity to have some work ongoing in the space and to learn online and participate. Where on any platform you find, you can be an advocate for youth issues across the world, and it begins with us for the change we want to see. So let's take our final words from Mr. Efa, and then we thank all of you for being a part.
All right, so Lily, there's nothing much to say than to thank everyone for coming. But let me just say that between now and next year, when we'll have another edition of WACREN Youth Day, we expect to have some more interaction, maybe again virtually, so we can advance the course that we are already on. As WACREN, what we are hoping to do is to sort of get the youth involved in what our NRENs are doing, which is essentially advancing research, teaching, and learning in higher education. So we are going to explore more ways that, I mean, the depth of thoughts that we are receiving today, the potentials that have been exhibited, our NRENs need to tap it and advance the teaching and learning in our universities. For instance, we offer digital services as, the NRENs offer digital services. If they can get in touch with you guys, they will be able to tap some ideas and be able to roll out services that are more relevant to the higher education sector. So what I would emphasize on, because of where I say it, is for the NRENs to, for us to get you in touch with the NRENs so they can tap more from you and advance research, teaching and learning in various jurisdictions in our region. So thank you very much. Over to you, Lily.
Thank you, everyone. I wish I could say thank you in every dialect represented here, but I can say merci beaucoup. I can say thank you. I can say yedase. I can say akwenao. And all the others, you can type in the chat to tell us how you say thank you in your language. But we really want to appreciate your time and for making this maiden edition of the WACREN Youth Day a success. We'll continue in the conversation and online, via mail, via social media. So please be on the lookout and let's have the work go beyond the this conference. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Efa, and for everybody on the committee that worked to make this happen. And for the CEO, we thank you for your time. We appreciate you. To all speakers, thank you so much. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you again on the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.